This is actually a poisoning rather than a drug overdose that is occurring. And China is at the center of this. The profit margins are so great, 30 times what they are for cocaine. Doesn't matter if you lose portions of your customer base. The money is just so good.
Fentanyl is the weapon of choice in a covert war that China is waging against the U.S. If the Trump administration's tariff threats against Canada, Mexico, and China, or threats to take back the Panama Canal, have been confusing to you, today's interview will give you the context you need. Peter Schweizer is the author of Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. He's president of the Government Accountability Institute, a #1 New York Times bestselling author, and he's our guest this week for an important conversation. I'm Ed D'Agostino, and this is Global Macro Update. Peter, I'm just so excited to speak with you today. I really appreciate your time because I think your work can really explain to a lot of people, a lot of Americans out there and beyond, what's going on right now. I think a lot of what's happening politically, a lot of what's coming out of this administration is confusing to people. So to set the stage, I just want to read a quote from your book, how you introduce your just amazing book, Blood Money. It's a quote from Chinese General Sun Tzu, who wrote the Art of War. Be so subtle that you are invisible. Be so mysterious that you are intangible. And then you'll control your rival's fate. So what are you talking about there?
Yeah, I'm talking about a war that has been going on, I would say, since President Xi came to power. But it's not a war as we think of it in the West. We think of kinetic wars. We think of, tanks in battle, aircraft fighting, missiles being launched. China's approach to war is very different than ours. Theirs is in a sense, a societal war. And they call it the most recent iteration. It really builds on Sun Tzu's strategies, but they call it disintegration warfare. And the idea is to sort of fragment and disintegrate, as it were, your political opposition. You do so by engaging in activities that are just short of military action. That way you have plausible deniability. So you look at opportunities to create social disruption. You look at ways to actually kill members of your competing population through things like fentanyl. And you look for opportunities to sow division internally within your political opponents. And I think they've had great success in doing so. And what you're seeing with Trump, I think, is sort of a pushback or an exposure of that, bringing it into stark relief. And I think when you look at a lot of the issues related to tariffs, et cetera, it all goes back to China and this sort of struggle that we are engaging in right now. We're just finally joining a war that has already been going on.
I think that goes a long way to explaining, for example, why Trump is sort of picking on, if you will, Canada, right? And I work with a lot of people in Canada. Everyone, I think, initially was really confused as to what's going on. But now the story around tariffs is coming out that this is all about fentanyl. I've spoken with journalist Sam Cooper about this, and his work, which I know you're familiar with, really goes into detail on how the CCP has, in many ways, compromised Canadian politicians all the way to the top. So what's your view on how Canada fits into this whole puzzle that we're dealing with?
First of all, I'm a big fan of Sam Cooper and his work. I think it's been groundbreaking and so critical in bringing into relief exactly what's going on. But yeah, I think a lot of the fire, as it were, that Trump has directed against China, it's not really against ordinary Canadians. It's against the political elite who obviously Canada elects their leaders. They can do as it were. But if those elites are captured in what the Chinese call elite capture, it means you're not getting actually the representative government that people expected. And I think Trump's approach is to really highlight and to bring that forward. In addition to that, America has this massive fentanyl problem. Estimates are 100,000 people are dying every year. It's now including other drugs in addition to fentanyl, carfentanil, and others. So those are sort of expanding the portfolio of drugs that are being brought into the United States. Much of it comes through Mexico, but it also comes through Canada. And what I think it's crucial for people to understand is this is not your typical drug abuse problem. This is not cocaine. This is not heroin, because the vast majority of people that are dying of fentanyl overdoses aren't even aware they're taking fentanyl. The news media kind of does a disservice here when they talk about the fentanyl crisis. They'll show somebody on the streets of San Francisco that is sort of shaking and going through withdrawal. These are hardcore fentanyl consumers, but most people are dying. These are, college kids who think they're taking an Adderall to focus for an exam, or they have some pain or something going on in their life, and they think they're taking a Vicodin, but it's actually a counterfeit drug that is spiked with fentanyl. So this is actually a poisoning rather than a drug overdose that is occurring. And China is at the center of this. As I talk about in my book, when you look at Mexico, you could do the same thing in Canada. Every single step in the equation, every single link in the chain, from the precursors produced in China to the actual laundering of drug money profits, involves China at its core. They're brought into Mexico in ports that are controlled by Chinese companies. The precursors are taken to northern Mexico, where we now know, according to leaked government officials that I quote the documents in my book, there are 2,000 Chinese nationals that are helping turn these precursors into fentanyl drugs. In both Canada and in Mexico, they are using pill presses that are produced in China that, according to our DEA, are being sold to drug operators at cost, meaning that these Chinese pill press companies aren't even making a profit on these pill presses. The communication devices that these drug cartels use are encrypted Chinese technology, because they know that the Chinese will not share that with U.S. law enforcement. And even the laundering of drug profit money, the old drug cartels, the Pablo Escobar days, they used to launder their money in Latin American banks. They now all use Chinese state-owned banks. So Mexico's the main player, but Canada is absolutely involved in this as well. And this is really what you're seeing from the Trump administration when it comes to tariffs and these issues. And he said so. He said, this is about fentanyl. You need to help us on fentanyl and help shut this down.
Can you give a little bit of color, Peter, for people who maybe are new to this story? We talk about it's China doing this, but it's really a few steps, right? Or a few different groups culminating in the Chinese Communist Party and the leadership of China knowing what is happening and deciding not to do anything about it because it serves their needs. Is that fair? And can you expand on that?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And it's really because of an alliance that was struck in the 1980s between the CCP, then the leader Deng Xiaoping, sat down with the Chinese organized crime syndicates and basically made peace. He said, look, if you acknowledge that the CCP is the supreme authority in China, and as long as you don't get out of hand here in China, if you operate and you engage in criminal activity overseas, that's fine. We'll be your partners. We'll cooperate with you. We'll provide you protection. And the criminal syndicates agreed in return to carry out certain intelligence functions for the CCP. So it's really a partnership between Chinese organized crime and the CCP, and it's been in place since the 1980s. So when you look at the fentanyl crisis, it really began around 2012. And what happened is we now know that a Chinese gang that operates out of China, that's headed in part by a guy named White Wolf, introduced to the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico fentanyl. And what is so revolutionary about fentanyl is before the Sinaloa cartel was, selling marijuana, but primarily cocaine, making good money doing so. But cocaine production and distribution is difficult. You have to carry around these quantities. It has to be grown, agriculturally. It needs to be transported. And the profit margins are great, but fentanyl changed all that. What Chinese organized crime told the Mexican drug cartels, and through their operations in Canada as well, what they said is, look, we've got this product that is so potent, it makes cocaine look like aspirin. And the profit margins on fentanyl are 30 times what they are with cocaine. So go into business with us. We'll provide you the precursors. We'll get the chemists here to create this deadly cocktail for you. And the drug cartels said we are all in. This has been known to the CCP. In fact, some high-ranking members of Chinese organized crime sit on Chinese Communist Party consultative bodies. I quote them and mention them in the book. So this is not, some hidden underground thing. It's being done out in the open. And the CCP recognizes this as a form of disintegration warfare against the United States, because you're essentially killing 100,000 Americans every year. It's the leading cause of death in the United States for people under the age of 45. And oftentimes, to be blunt, it's the best and the brightest. It's college students, it's young people who, again, think they're taking, Vicodin or something else to help them with a particular issue. So this is known by the CCP. It's sanctioned by the CCP. It's a form of warfare, and it's also highly profitable, not just for the drug cartels and the Chinese gangs, but also for the Chinese government itself.
Yeah, I mentioned to Sam Cooper, that I know a young woman who recently passed away, who was very bright in college, and this is exactly what happened to her. So I've been trying to impress upon people, you just don't know where this stuff is coming from. You don't know what it's going to be in, and it could be deadly. You write in the book about large marijuana growing operations in the United States that are run by these Chinese criminal organizations. And then they're lacing it all with fentanyl, which just sets the stage. And nobody would expect that their bag of weed that they picked up in their dorm room is going to be laced with fentanyl, and now they're going to be sent down a road of addiction or way worse.
Yeah, that's right. And I get people ask me sometimes, well, these drug cartels, their businesses, why would they want to poison their own customers? And the reality is the profit margins are so great, 30 times what they are for cocaine. Doesn't matter if you lose portions of your customer base. The money is just so good. And again, you're advancing the interests of the CCP. So it's a major problem. And this problem of illegal marijuana grows taking place in the United States, it's also happening to some extent in Canada, I think just signifies the problem as it exists. And that is that we in the United States are just completely ignorant and blind, or to use the term that Sam uses in his book, willfully blind by our leaders to ignore. So these illegal marijuana grows are being done by Chinese organized crime. A lot of the Chinese that are coming across or have been coming across the southern border in Mexico come here to work on these grows. And it's enormously profitable because they can sell below the rate of the stuff that's being sold legally. They're not paying taxes on it, and it's much more potent, which is what a lot of recreational marijuana users prefer. The problem, as you point out, is it's oftentimes laced with fentanyl to make it more potent. And that means that there are lots of cases where people have actually died from fentanyl poisoning as a result of just smoking marijuana.
You write in your book, and I can't plug this book enough, Blood Money, why the powerful turn a blind eye while China kills Americans. I mean, you can't get more direct than that. You point out in this book that some politicians have tried in Mexico, in Canada, and in the U.S. to call attention to this. But then something happens, and they seem to sort of forget about the issue or not bring it up. Can you maybe cite some examples of both abroad and closer to home of how that's happening and why?
It's this strategy that China calls elite capture. And again, it's a brilliant strategy. It essentially says, if we're competing against the United States or we're trying to co-opt Canada or Mexico, the best way to do that is just to effectively buy off their political leaders. And you do that by giving, quote unquote, legitimate business deals to their family members. And one of the most prominent ones I write about in the book involves Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden took in some $31 million from Chinese, quote unquote, businessmen and rendered no a legitimate business service in return. The money kept showing up. And you saw Joe Biden go from a senator who once called out China for their involvement in the 1990s when he was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, called them out for their involvement in the heroin trade, and rightfully so. But then when it came to fentanyl, it was almost completely silent. And I think the flow of money is one of those reasons. To pick somebody from the other side of the political aisle, you could also say the same thing about Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the Republican leader, at least until recently, for the Republicans in the Senate. His wife and her family have a shipping business, Foremost Shipping. And as I recount in the book, back in 1993, he's a young senator, goes to China with his wife. They are guests of the Chinese State Shipbuilding Corporation, which is the state-owned shipbuilding company. It's one of the biggest military contractors in China. And they essentially strike a deal with the McConnell Chow family whereby they say, look, we will build these large shipping boats for you. We will finance the construction for you. We will provide crews for you, and we will give you contracts from Chinese state-owned entities to help you build your business. And they took the deal. The problem is that Foremost Shipping now is so dependent upon China that industry people say that if Mitch McConnell were to take a position, stake out a position that Beijing didn't like, that they could destroy the family shipping business overnight. And that's the kind of leverage they want. It's important to point out, by the way, that it doesn't mean that these political leaders can't criticize China from time to time. Chinese leaders recognize that in the West, you need to maintain political viability. So you can criticize them for the treatment of the Uyghurs. You can criticize them in general on human rights issues, so long as you give them what they want, which is basically unfettered access to our technology and to our capital markets. They call this big help with a little bad mouth. That's the rough translation of the terms. And what they mean is, yeah, okay, you can criticize us as long as you give us big help in the areas that matter. And there are people in the United States and in other countries that absolutely have done so. And it's been a brilliant and effective strategy for Beijing.
You bring up shipping. I think that touches on Panama, which is another issue that's been in the news lately that a lot of people don't understand. Like, why is Trump trying to take back the Panama Canal? And then, right after that was announced, we had this blockbuster deal where the ports in Panama, where massive amounts of traffic between China and the U.S. go through, were sold by the Hong Kong tycoon who you mentioned in your book.
Yes, exactly. It's interesting. That company that owned those two sort of entry points to the Panama Canal is Hutchison, which is owned by Li Ka-shing, who's a very close to mainland China. That's the same company, by the way, that owns ports in western Mexico, where the vast majority of fentanyl precursors are being smuggled in. And Hutchison, by the way, has a long history of, let's just say, a cozy relationship with Chinese intelligence and the Chinese military, and has been criticized going back to the Bill Clinton administration for being, let's just say, controlling ports that are hotbeds for smuggling. So there are ample grounds to be concerned about Hutchison. And so it's not just that this was a Chinese company. It's a Chinese company that controls the access to the Panama Canal that has this long history of association with the CCP and has been a troublesome port manager elsewhere. So this, I think, is one of the reasons that Trump has staked out this position. And I think it's also, by the way, one of the reasons that not to veer too far from the topic, but to look at the Ukraine war, what everyone's views are. My view is clearly that Putin is the aggressor, and I'm glad that Putin has been punished and punished severely in that war. But the fact of the matter is, I believe that what Trump is trying to do to Ukraine is create peace in Ukraine, but also peel Russia away from China to further isolate China. It's kind of a reversal of what Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s when he went to China and said, hey, guess what? We'll sell you arms and let's share intelligence as long as you disconnect completely with the Soviet Union. So it's the same kind of strategic move. And I really do believe this is at the center point of mostly what Trump is doing in global affairs.
I want to circle back a little bit more on Li Ka-shing and Hutchison, because some of the things that both you and Sam Cooper talked about were just kind of shocking for someone new to the story. When I was just getting up to speed, I'm reading about this man who's probably in his 70s or 80s at this point, a long time Hong Kong tycoon, sort of one of the most wealthy people in that part of the world, a billionaire. And yet you both wrote about how he has direct ties to what are called triads. And that was really kind of shocking to me at first. Like, why would a successful, genuine billionaire business person also have ties to organized crime? But that's just sort of how it's all done in China, right? The organized criminal can also be the business tycoon and can also be a member of CCP or close to it.
That's very well said. And yeah, you can say that about Li Ka-shing. You can also say that about President Xi. If you look at Xi's political rise, he spent most of his time in one place, which was Fujian province, where he was the political leader. He was sort of a more subordinate person. Then he was the political leader. Fujian province is the hotbed. That is the location of where most of the triads in China are based out of. And there are lots of stories, I mentioned some of them in the book, where Fujian province in the early 2000s, when he was the leader, there were numerous instances where U.S. law enforcement was trying to get Chinese organized crime figures who had been in the United States, who had participated in murders, they'd been participating in drug activities, fled to Fujian province, and they got zero cooperation from Xi, saying, we don't know where he is, even though these people, according to New York Times reporters, were walking around openly in Fujian province. So there's been this long associated history between President Xi and these organized crime figures. And it's also known that he has at least a cousin, it could be other family members, who are involved in organized crime activities in Australia. So this is just kind of the way that you do business there. Remember, these are not societies that function on the rule of law. That's not to suggest that we don't have problems in the United States or in Canada or in other countries that are rule of law. But the point is, the law changes depending on the whims of the CCP. And so what that means is you have powerful figures that are making decisions, and they decide who's in and who's out. And if they decide that organized crime figures are in because they have commercial ties or because they're performing some useful service for the Chinese state, those people are in. And that's the kind of situation you're dealing with President Xi. So the notion that they are just going to have a crackdown on Chinese organized crime would essentially mean cracking down on their entire political network. And that's why this issue is so thorny. And that's why people like Li Ka-shing are always engaged in this balancing act, serving their masters in China, but also trying to run their businesses. And you notice that, Li Ka-shing, planned to sell his ports in the Panama Canal to BlackRock in the United States. And apparently the CCP's angry about it, said, you didn't consult us first on the matter. So he's caught in the middle, and I think I know which side he's going to end up on. That's the side where the CCP wants him to be.
So it's not just drugs. It's not just fentanyl. You write about something called Glock switches being imported, which is, well, maybe you could just explain that a little, because it's just jaw-dropping.
A Glock switch is a small device, just about the size of a quarter, metal device. If you slide it into the back of a Glock handgun, it turns that Glock handgun into a fully automatic machine gun, meaning you just squeeze the trigger and it is going to empty the magazine. They are, of course, highly illegal in the United States. You can obtain one if you are a federal firearms licensed dealer, but you undergo, obviously, a very severe background check. You have to control that device. You can't just carry it around wherever you want. So it's highly, highly regulated. And we got access to some leaked Department of Homeland Security documents that shows, beginning in 2018, these started showing up in massive numbers in the streets of America, thousands of them. And I recount a lot of the cases in the book. And they were all coming overwhelmingly from China. They were being sold openly on Alibaba. They were being sold on websites in China in English. And according to the Department of Homeland Security, they were particularly being focused their sales on organized crime syndicates in the United States, drug gangs, motorcycle gangs, street gangs, etc. And these small devices were being sold, for $100 a pop. So if you go on YouTube now and, Google, Glock switch police, you're going to find numerous instances where gang members are unloading basically machine guns on law enforcement in the United States. This is part of that disintegration warfare strategy by China. They want to see fragmentation in American society. They, by the way, ran stories in their official media about, look how crazy things are in America. They even got machine guns in the hang of gangsters. And of course, they never mentioned the fact that they were the ones that had provided them in the first place. So it is anything that sows fragmentation in the United States. That can be drugs, that can be guns, that can be, supporting divisive. I'm talking about extreme political groups in the United States that are involved in violent street protests. There are links with those organizations to Beijing as well, and they're happy to do so because they believe it shows that the United States is unstable, and it leads to a lack of trust in the United States in our political system, which is part of their objective.
So these devices are being shipped not through a port, in Panama, going to Mexico, and then being smuggled across the border. They're literally being mailed from China, get on a ship, and then delivered by the post office to the end user, right?
That's how it started. The Postal Service has now tried to screen them. So now packages coming from China, they will try to X-ray them. So they're having some success. But that continues. But you have the additional problem now that there are reports that these Chinese manufacturers have now gone to Mexico and, again, working with the drug cartels, are starting to produce Glock switches to smuggle across the border or to import from Mexico. So it is a constant battle that you have. And again, by the way, you get no cooperation from Chinese law enforcement on this. You cannot have a Glock switch in China. It's illegal to have it there. It's illegal to have a firearm in China. And yet when our law enforcement has identified to Chinese authorities individuals that are mass producing them and exporting them to the United States, the Chinese government does not arrest them and doesn't do anything.
The Chinese authorities have a pretty good handle on what's being shipped within their country, right? I mean, if they said stop, they could stop it.
Yes, 100%. I mean, remember the stories where probably about 8 or 10 years ago, some people started comparing President Xi to Winnie the Pooh, saying that there was a resemblance. And it was just sort of a cute meme. Xi, of course, didn't like it. Guess what? There are no products produced in China, no posters, no stuffed animals that show President Xi as Winnie the Pooh, because they've decided it's not going to happen, and it simply does not happen. So, yeah, they could shut down this stuff immediately. They could say to those producing precursors, if you send a precursor chemical to Mexico without a licensed, established recipient, you will be thrown into jail. They could tell the Chinese pill press producers, by the way, U.S. federal law in Canada and elsewhere is that if you import a pill press, there needs to be a license notification sent to the Food and Drug Administration, precisely because you don't want drug dealers getting these industrial-sized pill presses. Chinese government does not get their manufacturers to comply with that. And it's the same thing with the Glock switches. So they are not going to cooperate in these areas, even though this is a government that has essentially whole control over its own people.
President Obama, in his term, had an agreement of sorts with China to tamp down on these types of activities. And President Trump, in his first term, had the same type of agreement. Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. And I think part of what you're seeing with Trump is his anger at the fact that when, I think they had dinner in Mar-a-Lago, 2017 or 2018, and Xi promised him to his face, we will take care of the fentanyl issue. Trump tweeted out about it, and Xi didn't do anything about it. And I think Trump, was quite angry about that. And now the expectation is, don't tell me, show me. And I think that's what he's applying to China. I think he's also applying that to Sheinbaum in Mexico, and he's also applying that to Canada. Sheinbaum sent 10,000, Mexican soldiers to the border. Well, remember in his first term, they sent 7,000 to the border, and it didn't make any difference. So, stop with the theatrics. Let's actually show us that you're dealing with this issue. And now time is going to tell whether they actually will do that or not.
So do you think we're on the right path? And if you don't, what else do you think needs to be done for us to fight back?
I think this is the right path. And I think the difficult, painful thing, particularly for countries that generally would consider friends, is that sometimes between friends, you have to call them out when they are failing to protect you the way that friends are supposed to. If you look what's happening in Europe right now, on the one hand, they're all saying, oh, America's abandoning us, poor Trump. But what they're actually doing is, Germany just announced $1 trillion investment in their national defense. France has announced they're boosting it. The point is that his action has compelled our allies and friends to be doing what they should have been doing in the first place, which is be prepared to defend themselves and not rely on the United States. And I think it's the same thing as it relates to fentanyl. I would certainly want to think that if the United States were allowing it to be used as a base of operation for criminal activity that was severely affecting Canada, that Canada would come to us and say, wait a second, friends don't allow this to happen. Can you not take care of this problem? That's where we've been with Canada on fentanyl, going back to the Obama administration with very few results. Certainly that's been the case with Mexico with no results. So we're simply asking our friends and allies to do what they should have been doing for a long time and that we've asked them politely to do and they failed to do. So this is a way to get their attention.
It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. But at first I was confused as to where it was an announcement of tariffs first, and there was no mention of actions to be taken or fentanyl and I suppose looking back, it was, well, now that we have your attention, here's what we need you to do. It certainly seems to have been effective. We'll see.
I think that there are times when you can certainly say that Trump could say things more diplomatically or more directly. But, at the end of the day, this is a real estate negotiator, deal maker from New York. And, you can envision him going up to a building that he wants to buy. And let's say he wants to pay $400 million for it, and it's listed for $600 million. He's going to go in there and say the electrical system is shot, the foundation is cracking, this neighborhood is crap. I'll give you $350 for it. I mean, it's part of a negotiating tactic. But that said, I think it's you want to have honesty and transparency in these types of discussions. I do think that the jokes about the 51st state is really a way to get the attention. And what you're seeing, I think, in Canada is very healthy. You're seeing this sort of rising nationalism, this sense of pride, and hopefully it's going to lead to saying, you know what, we need to take care of some things that have not been taken care of because we've been lackadaisical in the past.
Peter, I guess last thing I would want to ask you is, in the U.S., our political system, in some ways, it seems pretty ripe for outsiders to corrupt it. And I'm thinking specifically about PACs, political action committees, and just the ability to take in phenomenal amounts of money from who knows where and influence our elections. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a huge problem. Two things that I think are surprising to a lot of people. If you are a permanent resident in the United States, which, by the way, means you're not a U.S. citizen, of course, but it also means that you don't actually have to live here. There are lots of people in China and elsewhere who have permanent resident status who only visit from time to time. A permanent resident can't vote in American elections, but guess what? They can contribute to campaigns. Think about that for a second. The second thing to realize is that you have these entities called 501c4s. These are nonprofit organizations. They're not tax exempt, but they can function effectively as political action committees. They don't really have to disclose their donors, and a lot of them will accept donations from LLCs, limited liability companies. They'll receive a $5,000 check. Nobody really knows who owns that LLC. It's registered in Delaware to a law firm, and they're not under any legal obligation to actually explore who is sending them the $5 million. So this is another massive loophole in our funding. So I think we've got to get our hands around foreign money coming into campaigns. We also have to get our hands around the issue of transparency. Okay, maybe you can make the case that foreign nationals should be able to fund our campaigns. The Supreme Court in the Citizens United case said that political contributions are a First Amendment right. And certainly permanent residents in the United States have some First Amendment rights. But should there not be some disclosure? Should there not be some transparency so people know if a certain political candidate is getting a lot of money from foreign nationals that happen to be living in the United States? Those are the sorts of things we should be looking for. It's a huge problem because as we have become more global in orientation, meaning you've got a lot more commerce, a lot more interconnections between countries, it means that a lot of foreign governments, corrupt foreign governments and oligarchs have a lot to win or lose depending on decisions being made in the United States, and they're willing to drop tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into our politics to get what they want. And usually what they want is not what the rest of us really want.
Can DC address that, or is DC just too addicted to money that they just won't do it?
It's a good question. I know that there are people actually in both political parties who have raised this issue. The banning of donations from foreign nationals was actually in the original McCain-Feingold bill 15, 20 years ago. There were a lot of things I didn't like about that bill, but it was something that they tried to address. And I think there are people that want to. The challenge, I think, is that realistically in the next 2 years, there's so many things that Congress is going to be wrestling with. The tax cut, spending, everything going on with DOGE. These are highly complex competitive issues. You've got a razor-thin majority for the Republicans in the House of Representatives. So it makes it very, very hard to take on these kinds of issues in a consistent way. But they need to be highlighted. They need to be focused because foreign influence campaigns in the United States are a massive, massive problem. We hear a lot about, Russian attempts. We should hear about those, but honestly, they're pretty clumsy. They're sort of blunt force instrument types of efforts by the Russians. That tends to be their style. I'm more concerned about the highly sophisticated efforts by the Chinese and by other actors that are far harder to detect, and I would argue are far more effective than this kind of stuff we get out of the Kremlin.
Peter, the work that you do it's so important, and I really, really appreciate it. Your book, Blood Money, this is just the latest of your efforts. Where can viewers go to learn more about you and your organization?
Thank you for your kind words, first of all. You can follow me on Twitter X at Peter Schweizer. You can go to peterschweitzer.com, or you can go to The Drill Down, which is the webpage for my podcast. And also we put up a lot of research reports and things that we're working on. Our orientation is to expose cronyism and corruption in Washington, D.C., which, as a friend of mine who used to be a pilot in the Air Force called it, is a target-rich environment. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to continue to do that work, and we'll call out either side when they're engaged in that kind of behavior.
Fascinating conversation. Again, I appreciate everything that you do for us. Thank you, Peter. It was a pleasure.